Well, thank you again, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you all here on this Wednesday for this Lunch and Learn with Stay Salty and, of course, the Salt Lake City Arts Council. My name is Angela H. Brown, and I am the Executive Director for Craft Lake City, and I'm so pleased to be here today, again, with you all to talk about this incredible streetside exhibition that we've got here that has been launched earlier this month. So before we start, we're going to go ahead and do a land acknowledgement. I think we're going to switch to the next slide. But before we do that land acknowledgement, let's go ahead and go over these quick notes. Just a little housekeeping things. Let's mute our microphone. And of course, if we're called on during the Q&A period, that's a great time to unmute. But other than that, please keep your microphone muted so that we can hear the presenters. There are captions, live captions at the bottom, if that's something that you would like to turn on. They toggle on and off with the closed captions at the bottoms, and then the live transcripts, as you can kind of read here in the notes. This is a virtual event that is supposed to be interactive, and we encourage to have you participate all throughout the talk here. And one way to do that is in the chat. So please put in your comments, questions. If there's something that really resonates with you, we love to hear it in the chat. And then, of course, at the end, there will be a short amount of time for some live Q&As. You could either type in your question in chat, or if you want to be called on, you can raise your hand at that time using the raise hand function here in Zoom. We'll also be sending out a brief survey and posting a link as well. These surveys really do help us create better content. So if you don't mind just taking a few moments and doing that, that would be wonderful. And now let's go ahead with the land acknowledgement. Craft Lake City would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land upon which the organization resides, the nation of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute. We pay our respects to these nations and their elders, past and present. We respect their spiritual beliefs and the connections to the land. We further acknowledge the important roles Indigenous communities contribute today. Now, Craft Lake City. What is Craft Lake City? So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we provide a lot of different content, but our mission is to educate, promote, and inspire local artisans while elevating the creative culture of the Utah arts community through science, technology, and art. And one of the ways that we do this is through our annual programming. We do the annual Craft Lake City DIY Festival that happens at the Utah State Fair Park. This will be its 17th year. We also host other events. We host the annual Letter West, which is a partnership with Midvale that's coming up in March. And then, of course, our annual Holiday Market, which is a partnership up in Ogden with the Ogden community. We also do year-round programming that includes our Youth Artisan Entrepreneur program, our year-round workshops, and then, of course, what we're here today to talk about, which is our Local Voices partnership, which is where we go ahead and partner with another organization, in this instance, it's Stay Salty today, to produce quality programming in an artful way down on the streets of Salt Lake City. Now, these plakats, which is the German term for billboard, align the 3rd South Corridor between Main Street and 2nd West. And we've got 14 different plakats there that show wonderful messages, and we're very excited to tell you about those today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Tiana Young, who is our Artisan and Programs Manager. I'm so thrilled. I think we may have frozen there for a moment. It's my pleasure to introduce Tiana Young, our Artisan and Programs Manager for Craft Lake City, who will be taking over the discussion and leading us today.
Thank you so much, Angela. It is such an honor to be here. As somebody who's an artist, but also has a degree in sustainability myself, really is an honor to be a part of this installation, but also to be a moderator for this discussion. So I'm very excited to dive into kind of the meaning behind the installation, the stories of the wonderful individuals featured, as well as the stories and from the team that is responsible for putting it together. So I do want to just kind of give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew. Could you please tell us a little bit about your background and your role in this project?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Andrew Shaw, the Special Projects Coordinator and Wake the Great Salt Lake lead at the Salt Lake City Arts Council. So in this role, it means I can pick up a lot of projects that come my way, and I was really excited to receive the Wake the Great Salt Lake project as a special project that I'm focusing on. My background in the arts is that I'm a musician and a photographer, and have been on some nonprofit boards. Right now, I'm on the board of the Davy Foundation, which is a filmmaking nonprofit that helps emerging artists make short films. Um, and so all of this, I kind of feel like I have a nice wide-ranging view of the arts and how they can help our communities. And super excited that I get to spend my days with the Salt Lake City Arts Council, helping other people celebrate the arts.
Gosh, and thank you so much for being here to lend some of your unique perspective and field of expertise. Meisei, would you please tell us a little bit about your background and or story and your role in this project?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everyone. My name is Meisei Gonzalez. I am a co-host of Stay Salty, Lakefacing Stories. A little background about me. I'm an environmental justice advocate and communicator based in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm actually the climate justice and clean air advocate with Green Latinos, which is a federal nonprofit that looks at environmental justice throughout the nation. A lot of my work is focused on the environmental disparities going on in the Latino and LGBTQIA community, so a very intersectional lens on the environmental world. I've done a lot of lobbying and advocacy work here in Utah as well as in DC to ensure that a lot of frontline communities are not being overburdened by a lot of these environmental issues going on, whether it's a new renewable project, making sure that it's not going to perpetuate some issues that have happened in the past with fossil fuels, to stopping fossil fuels ongoing threats. So that's a little bit about the work I do. Love Salt Lake City, big on foodie here. So if anyone knows a good boba shop, I'm always down to go get boba. And at the Capitol, I used to be called the Enviro Cowboy, which was a lot of fun because I love wearing Western clothes and it's always very environmental like themed. So that's a little bit about myself.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Being from Texas myself, I love a good Western outfit.
It's a lot of
Thank you.
fun, especially the cowboy boots. You'll hear me at the Capitol with those cowboy boots. They're very clanky.
Oh yeah, they know you're coming. That's honestly kind of nice. It's like a bell as you're walking off. Yeah, and thank you again for being here, Mace. It's so wonderful to have you part of this project. Jeri, again, would you please share a little bit about your background or history, as well as your role?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Jeri. I was the photographer for this project, and I was so honored to be able to be involved and photograph all the amazing storytellers. My background, I studied sustainability and art. So I love to combine art with the science to communicate specifically things around climate change to the general public. That's kind of my goal in all of my work. So this project really aligns with that. I'm from Michigan, so when I came here, I had such a love for the lakes out there. And I came to Salt Lake, and the first thing I did was head out to the lake. So I've had a deep love for Great Salt Lake for the decade that I've lived here. And I work at the Salt Lake City Public Library, so I'm very involved with the community. I do social media management and photography at the library. So a lot of moving parts, but I just love art and activism.
Awesome. Yeah, and people say that nature is one of the biggest inspiration for art. So that's beautiful. Awesome. And if you can go to the next slide. And now we're in I'd love to introduce our guest speakers. And we have two of these guest speakers are actually featured on the placards. So we are lucky enough to be able to hear their story directly from the source and be able to talk about all sorts of really inspiring and important topics directly with them. So I would love to pass it off to Sunny to give a little bit of insight into you, your backstory, and give a little bit of an introduction. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Sorry, it might be a little bit confusing because it has my full name on my Zoom thing, but anyways, you can call me Sunny. It's the nickname that I go by in the prison. It's my connection to this project, actually through Meisei. So I work with incarcerated survivors in the Salt Lake City prison, which is the new location. Previously, it was located in Draper, and then they relocated just west of the Salt Lake Airport. And so my connection to this project really My work in climate change has just come out of my identity being Pacific Islander. So a lot of cultural practices and cultural traditions that exist in my culture are directly connected with the earth. And so just from a young age, I've just always had a respect for the earth and all its inhabitants. And I've just had an understanding that, a lot of people, especially with modern Western colonization, we've been disconnected from. And so my goal with climate change has been really connecting people back to the land back movement and understanding what it means to grant land stewardship back to indigenous peoples, because they really do understand what it takes to not only care for the land, but preserve it for future generations. And so my connection specifically, at least in the Salt Lake Valley, because I work in the prison, for those of you that don't know, it is located by the Great Salt Lake, and we know that with the environmental changes that are happening with the drying up of the Great Salt Lake, it directly impacts the prison community. Not only the incarcerated individuals that live within the prison, but also the prison staff. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, that's my direct connection. And so within the photo that Jeri was able to take of me, um, she asked each of us to have, I guess, something that could represent, what tied us to the Great Salt Lake. And so I have my watch there. It's the watch that I bring with me into the prison because I can't have technology. So I don't have access to my phone. So I don't know what time it is. And so I use that watch to go into the prison so I can keep track. And so it's the one thing that, ties me to my work in the prison and advocating for the incarcerated population.
Thank you, Sunny, and thank you for providing a little bit of context as well. It's so wonderful to meet you. This is the first time we're talking too, so thanks again for being here. I can't wait to dive more into the meaning behind your visuals, but also your story here in a bit. Awesome. And then, Brad, would you please give us a little bit of your background and connection to this project? I think you're muted, Brad, just as a heads up. Brad, just excuse me, sorry. I think we're having a bit of technical difficulty. Or is everyone else hearing that as well? Thank you. Yeah, Kaylee, would you try to maybe refresh the screen? Thanks for your patience, y'all. We're just gonna do a little bit of troubleshooting and get back onto the scheduled program in just hopefully a minute or two.
in our
I don't know if I've ever seen that before. Kaylee, is that coming from your computer, you think, when you try to unmute yourself? And you, feel free to just type it in the chat too, if that's easier.
Actually, I haven't unmuted myself until right now. It's something with Brad's mic that's getting the feedback. In our in our
Yes.
in our in our in our in our in our in our in
It might
our
be,
in our in our
it might be worth, yeah, it might be worth popping out of the meeting and then trying to rejoin again, Brad. Thank you, Andrew. All right. You know, it's not a Zoom meeting if there's not at least one technical challenge. Um, but with nonetheless, when Brad gets back in, I think we can circle back. But I do kind of, just for the sake of time, want to keep moving forward. So I do want to just kind of talk about Stay Salty and of Salt and Sand, and give a little bit of insight into the organization and this really amazing project that you all have created. So this is to both, I'm going to pass over to Meisei, actually. Meisei, could you tell us a little bit about Of Salt and Sand, the organization behind the project, and tell us just a little bit about what you are, maybe what your mission is, and what this installation means to your organization?
Yeah, definitely. So, Of Salt and Sand is a Utah-grown crew of storytellers, journalists, artists, facilitators, multimedia producers, and community organizers. We came together in 2022 with one big belief: storytelling can help Utahns shift from an extractive economy to one that truly values dignity, resilience, and life. We love Utah, the land, the water, all Utahns, and that love drives us to create stories that dig into what it means to stay here, even as we navigate these economic transitions and a changing climate. So, in a world that often says just leave, we're trying to really challenge that and see um, almost like what our commitment is here to stay home. So, through storytelling like this installation, we're here to help communities find an opportunity to honor where we've been and where we dream of going, and build something beautiful within our state. So, this installation highlights the Stay Salty Lakefacing podcast and multimedia project, which I can give a little background. Right, it looks like you're still having that feedback, by the way. But I can kind of go into Stay Salty, the Lakefacing Stories, a little bit, kind of overview of the project. It's that multimedia and podcast, which ties into stories of those who are overlooked, with the connection to the shrinking of the drying Great Salt Lake. So we explore the questions: why stay, how to stay, and who gets to stay or leave. And through our salty humor and honesty, we tackle what it means to remain in the Great Salt Lake Basin amidst a unfolding ecological and public health crisis. So that's a little bit about the project.
Wow, that's incredible too. Kind of taking a different approach to kind of this like overarching, like definitely resurfacing issue that is, I think, kind of on the forefront of all of our minds, taking such a creative approach. And from what I understand, it's in collaboration with a really cool, even larger project. And I kind of want to shift to Andrew for this one before we circle back to you, Meisei. So thank you for kind of setting the stage on that. Andrew, could you please, so from what I understand, this project is part of Wake the Great Salt Lake. Can you share more about what that means? What is the Wake the Great Salt Lake project?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wake the Great Salt Lake is a project of the three groups that you see logos of here: the Salt Lake City Arts Council, the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office, and Bloomberg Philanthropies. A little over a year ago, the Arts Council received a $1 million grant through Bloomberg Philanthropies Public Art Challenge. And when you apply for this Public Art Challenge, this is the third time that they've done the Public Art Challenge, and it's a nationwide project. I think about 150 different cities across the nation applied, and they selected 8. So Salt Lake City is one of 8 cities right now that received this grant. The Public Art Challenge uses temporary public art projects to address critical civic issues. So when you apply, you state what your critical civic issue is, and we said that the decline of the Great Salt Lake was really top of mind for us, and what we wanted to use these temporary public art installations to address. Just quickly, the other cities that we're in this cohort with are Atlanta, Baltimore, Honolulu, Houston, Orlando, Philadelphia, and Phoenix. And so we're just really excited to be part of this greater cohort. Wake the Great Salt Lake is going to have 2 phases. So the Stay Salty exhibition is part of our local activations phase, where we did a call for entries, for proposals from local artists and artists with Utah ties to hear how they wanted to use their art practice to address the decline of the Great Salt Lake. out of over 120 applications, we were only able to select 12. And so it was a really um, competitive process to arrive at these. And one of those was this awesome photo exhibition from Stay Salty. We're just huge fans of what Of Salt and Sand does, and of this podcast, how they use multimedia, really engaging storytelling and audio to tell the moving and vulnerable stories of people who are truly impacted by this. I feel like they are illuminating corners of this conversation that otherwise aren't being told. And so, yeah, just really excited that we can do our part to help uplift and amplify all the great work that they're doing. The second phase of Wake the Great Salt Lake is called our Signature Commission. And with this, we are going to commission a large artwork from an internationally renowned artist. We're currently in the process of receiving a couple of proposals from artists. And once we select one, you're going to hear a lot more about it, hopefully. And it's the sort of thing that we hope that not only everybody in Salt Lake City and the Great Salt Lake Basin is going to see, but we want to draw eyes from around the nation and around the world to say, this is a big issue that we're addressing here in Salt Lake City. If you want to know more about what we're doing, visit our website, wakegsl.org, and we're also on Instagram, wakegsl.
Thank you, Andrew. And through this specific collaboration with Stay Salty, how do you hope, and I guess Wake the Great Salt Lake is a hope, as the project lead, how do you hope that this project shapes the conversation around the lake's future? I know you briefly touched on that, but I would love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've just been thinking about a lot since I was kind of took on the lead of this project was, where does art fit into this conversation? Yesterday I went to a breakfast with where the Great Salt Lake Strike Team was present, and so the state level scientific and government experts who are really working hard to address this. And so there's a lot of people coming together and really unifying and striking collaboration to address this issue. But I think what art does is it helps really bring it to the people, and it helps make sure that regular people who aren't government officials or who aren't research scientists understand the issue, that they don't just understand that it is an issue, but understand like the true facts of it. And so that's something we're really focusing on with these art projects and talking with these artists to make sure that their work is rooted in actual information and not just raising a red flag. And then also helps our community see their part in the solutions and build that commitment and know what sort of actions they can take to be impactful for this crisis. The two kind of like main values that we're really focused on are hope and unity. We see that when our communities are faced with these existential crises, and this is a really big and scary issue, the lake in decline, we see that art has a way of helping create that hope with each other and being able to see a brighter future and imagine a better future when we've solved the problem. And it also has the power to unify people and to help cross some of those divisions that are so prominent in our world today. And that's what we need in order to be impactful on preserving the lake. So that's kind of what we're focused on, and what our artists are working on together. Another thing that we're doing with Wake the Great Salt Lake is just building an artist cohort amongst these 12 artists involved with the local activations. And we meet every month and share our progress and ask each other questions. And it's been really great to build that community of artists who are all working together on this.
That's beautiful. And that actually reminds me of kind of Jeri's field of expertise in connecting art with, sustainability. And I kind of want to hear on that note, thank you, Andrew, so much. I cannot wait to see more about how this project develops, and you called it the signature commission. I will be eagerly awaiting the announcement for that, so I can go check it out myself as well. So thank you so much for being here and for providing that context. Yeah, so inspiring. So Jeri, I want to pass it over to you at this point. What about this Wake the Great Salt Lake and project, and about the connecting art and sustainability in terms of inspiring people to take action and creating hope and unity? What about that really sticks out to you in relation to this project? I think I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. What I've learned when I moved out here and also going through school is that you don't want to work towards protecting a place if you don't know and love that place. And I think art and photography, especially in this instance, can bring the people in the lake to more people through those photographs, right? So when I moved here, I learned that so many people called the lake this stinky place and had never been out there. And of course, that's being able to go to the lake is a privilege, right? Not everyone has that ability. Another reason to bring art into the city, right? So people can see these beautiful landscapes and see how gorgeous the lake is, and it's worth saving, right? But so many people haven't been out there. And so that is the true power of art in this conversation, is we have to figure out a way to get people to care. And without showing the place and the people, the stories, all of those things, I just think that's such an important element. If we can say the science all day, right? The lake is drying up, we need to do all of these things, but without that connection to the lake, are people going to show up? Are people going to, call their representatives? Are they going to go to the protest? Are they going to, talk to their friends about this issue? So that's why I think the art and the photography is so important to that connection piece.
Yeah, gosh. And this installation does really do such a great job at providing that human aspect in such a really beautiful way of kind of personifying the lake in a new lens of not just, oh, here's this landform, like, oh, cool, like you said, oh, here's this like stinky lake or whatever, which is like obviously very much not the case. And, kind of breathing that like meaning into it, and, connecting that with like the greater, people. It's like, oh, why should I care? Just go take a look at the installation, and I'm sure you'll find at least one reason that resonates. So thank you, Jeri. Yeah, and I do want to speak a little bit about the kind of the installation as a whole. So Jeri, you've captured many, if not all, of these images as part of this larger narrative. And you kind of gave us an insight into that when you're in your previous response, but can you share a little bit about your thought process behind this collection as a whole, and kind of how you and kind of your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. This project was so fun to work on, y'all. It was so fun. I loved meeting everybody so much. So I really wanted it to be cohesive, right? I wanted to translate a sense of place and connection, not only with the lake, but also with all of these storytellers to each other, right? We're all a part of this community. So I didn't want them all to look different in that sense. I wanted to have their own unique pieces, but I really wanted there to be a theme, right? So each person got to pick a place that they felt connected to the lake or to the watershed, right? Some of them are tributaries. Sugar House Park, people go there all the time, right? They're not thinking about maybe that connection to the lake. And so each person picked a spot that felt like the lake to them, but the theme was that I wanted them each to pick an image, or not an image, sorry, an object that they felt connected them to the lake or to this, their story specifically. And so each person, as Sunny was saying, had the watch. You can see, a feather or a bow, or, the baby goats, right? All of those were things that people selected, but then it contributes to the larger story and to more pieces. I didn't want it to just be a portrait of a person. I really wanted that sense of place and that connection in all the images to be one whole thing. And when we had originally, our first show was at the city library. And so we had a very specific wall. So when it was shown there, everyone was literally looking at the lake. So everyone is also facing the exact same direction, which also connects that piece in a sense of direction and lake facing. So there's a lot of pieces and thought that went into these images as well. And I just loved everyone's choice of place and choice of, Fleur brought her son. And I just think that is just so telling the story about, future generations. He had was her connection to the lake. So those are some of the things that went into the images.
Wow, so much thought and intention behind, building. I think it's easy to just be like, oh, it's like a photograph. That's cool. But it's really interesting to hear kind of like the thought process and the craft and all of the like. It's almost like you're telling a story on how you want to tell the story, right? Behind each one of these images. I kind of want to shift to Meisei before circling back to you, Jeri. But Meisei, so as the podcast host, you're in charge of the other parts. So kind of telling the story through words and in getting that information out of the guests. So on that front, what was your approach in telling, kind of similar to the question for Jeri, but what was your approach in curating these written, verbal experiences as part of the project as a whole?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we approached this in a way that was really open with wherever it's going to take us, right? The lake is connected to individuals in such different ways. And through the podcast, you get to hear that. Maybe we started on the conversation of air quality, but housing insecurity came up and disability came up in these different aspects. So we were really open to that kind of back and forth conversation. And I actually had I kind of treated like every interview as like me just hanging out with a friend. Like we just went down, we sat down, we kind of kikied back and forth, laughed a lot. There's so much laugh track like that we had to cut out because I really wanted to not feel like I'm like doing like a very cold interview, but more of just highlighting their story. And through that, I feel like we did a really amazing job, and hopefully, you can reflect that in the podcast where you are hearing the real lives of individuals, a little snapshot of what they're living day to day, and their concerns, their anger, their love, all of those different emotions related to the Great Salt Lake. So that has been something that's been really beautiful to witness, and the humor part was a lot of fun too. We had a laugh, because it's one thing we know that this is a very heavy and really distressing topic that's going on, right? But there's still a lot of joy in that, and a lot of really good memories and dreams for the lake. I think one that keeps coming to mind was when we interviewed T, who is an individual who's in prison. He kept talking about like a future of coming out of prison and going to the lake again. And those hopes were really beautiful to kind of hear from and to understand of that connection with the lake. So yeah, that's kind of how we approached it. It was a lot of fun.
That's beautiful. I love what you said about humor, and you kind of referred back to that earlier when you talk about the salty type of humor, which is pretty fun and unique. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? You kind of spoke a little bit to it, but could you provide what insight can you provide us to what listeners can expect?
Yeah, definitely. So listeners can definitely expect a wide variety of emotions through it. You'll definitely get some like statistics and kind of more of that like journalistic side of things where we kind of break down what's going on with the lake. But also, our little humor. We got some sass. We have our own issues with what's going on with the lake. It's kind of like how did we get here? And we're kind of making fun of our like selves and our system for letting us get to the point where our lake is drying. Like if you think about it, like come on, why are we being dumb humans? Like that's kind of funny. Like kind of poking fun of that piece of things. And then really kind of owning into to those different pieces of making sure we still have our joy. Again, it's a very deep and very scary thing, but humor came up out of almost every single interview we talked about. Just because you can't take that away from an individual, is their joy. And I think that's a really great and radical way to kind of go towards a lot of these movements, is to not let it beat you up to that point where you don't have joy. So that's kind of what you can expect in our podcast.
Thank you so much. I do have maybe one more question for you. I'm going to save it to the end. But I would love to start talking to Sunny and kind of get a little bit more of Sunny's story here. So, Kaylee, if you could please navigate to that image. And while we're waiting to the Stay Salty podcast yet.
Sorry, it went kind of frozen. Was that question for me?
Oh yeah, so it was actually for the audience. While we were,
Okay.
because I think it was because my screen was frozen. I was just asking if anyone has had the pleasure of being able to listen to any of the episodes of the podcast yet. It is really really amazing, super well rounded. Like Meisei was talking about, has a lot of really interesting facts too. I learned a ton just listening from like a few. And there are how many Meisei total?
11 episodes total.
Nice. And are y'all still releasing more?
No, that's a to be announced. So definitely keep following us on Instagram of Salt and Sand for any more updates for a possible season two. We don't know. Things could happen. We're putting it into the world. We're manifesting it.
Amazing. I will be following very closely in anticipation for that season. Awesome. It doesn't look like there's any questions from the chat yet, but we would love to hear from you. For everyone who is here, please drop in any questions and we will get to it during the Q&A. So Sunny, thanks so much for being here. You kind of talked a little bit about your background, but I would love to hear, especially since now we have this visual in front of us, a little bit more about your story, your connection to the lake, and kind of how you feel that this is reflected in this beautiful piece of work in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm originally from the Bay Area of California. Ethnically, I'm Tongan, so that's kind of like where my cultural background is from, being Polynesian and Pacific Islander. So while I may not be from Utah, I've been here for the last 10 years. And so I've, been familiar with the Great Salt Lake, have traveled to there myself, been privileged to really appreciate the landscape that we have here in Utah. And I think a lot of Utahns take it for granted. But again, really with my cultural background, it's the main thing that has given me the perspective that I do have when I think about the land, when I think about the earth as a living organism. I always kind of compare it to one of my favorite Disney songs, Colors of the Wind. Even though Pocahontas is problematic as a movie, I love the song because there's a line in it that says, as she's singing it, she talks about how like every rock and tree and creature has a spirit, has a name. And to a lot of people, that may sound silly if they don't look at the earth or just very little things in that spiritual lens. But that is really the lens that I operate from and always have. And I'm really grateful that I have been raised in that cultural upbringing because it allows me to respect the land in a different way. When I actually entered into the position that I have now, where I work with the prison, when I started visiting the prison, already I was like, alarm bells were going through my head because when you drive out to the prison, it is far out in the middle of nowhere. Um, to the point where like, no one really knows exactly where it's located unless you drive out there yourself. And when I would make that drive to visit with my incarcerated clients, I started asking questions to the prison staff and the individuals that I was working with. Why did you guys choose this location to relocate an entire, prison? And the prison is meant to house up to 4,000 people. So we're not talking about a small prison. We're talking about what would be the size of a typical city, right? And so as I started asking questions really easily, I could just see either whether it was the confusion or just like the sense of guilt, the sense of fear. And to give a little bit of background, there were actually 30 locations that they could have chosen from to rebuild this prison. And they happened to choose the one location that had very low environmental scores, but they completely disregarded it anyways. And so really through just like through word of mouth and talking with people, I became educated on just the trends that we see, especially with the incarcerated population. I even tie it back to not excuse me, climate disasters that we've seen in the past, like with Hurricane Katrina, when they didn't have an evacuation plan for the prisoners there and completely left the entire prison population during that climate disaster. And so my goal really with my experience and work with the prisoner population is really spreading awareness to people and thinking about these very large environmental concerns and the fact that this population is often forgotten in the conversation when it comes to climate change. And so that's why I really appreciated this project and Meisei and Jeri really bringing me on and even highlighting, T's story and just the incarcerated population because they aren't um, at the forefront, even though they should be. And so what brought me to this is just kind of not only spreading awareness, but just trying to show people really the stupidity and the fact that these things have been allowed to happen, that they chose to build this prison at this location. And we know that I believe the last conversation that I had with someone from the administration. I have a good relationship with him, so he's been really open with me about the harsh realities of the prison location. About 74% of the site has limited soils, and 25% of the soil that it's built on is toxic. So we're talking about if any of those toxins were to enter into the water supply that they have in the prison, it would be detrimental to everyone, not just the prisoner population, but also the prison staff that works 24/7 around the clock because it's a high secure facility. And so, and mind you, a lot of the prison staff aren't even aware of the environmental impacts of the location and what's happening with the drying up of the Salt Lake. And so, even that is something that I hope through projects like this, through art, that we can just educate people. But I love the piece that Meisei was talking about with the piece about joy. Even though, especially when we talk about climate change, it feels very bleak. It feels very scary. But what I've tried to take from this, as someone who has a spiritual connection to the land that I walk on, is understanding that no matter what, doing nothing garners nothing, right? It equates to no change. But doing something will always produce and lead to a future where we could see potential change. And I love I can't remember her name, one of the visuals where she brought her son, that was very beautiful to me because that's really what this is about. Climate change is about the future children, the future generations to come. And I just love that this whole project is really trying to get people to care because it really impacts everyone. I had an opportunity to actually go back to my homeland last year, and it was a really sacred experience. And I say this to say, being on the island myself and seeing how climate change has actually impacted the South Pacific and the Pacific Islanders, my people, it's really drastic. I was talking to the islanders back in my homeland in the islands of Tonga, and a lot of the things that they're telling me is that literally most of, their island homes have been receded, so the ocean has risen, and because of that, it's directly impacting them. And so I think something that I hope to also achieve through this conversation is really um, making sure that this is real. This has real impacts all over the world, from small islands to Utah State. We can go on and on about how climate change is really affecting real life people, everyday people, and I hope that we can continue to bring more people into this movement. And so yeah, I'll stop there. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, love this conversation.
No, yeah, thank you so much, Sunny. That's so like what a unique perspective too. Obviously, there are some shared aspects, considering we are all here together today. However, regarding like your cultural impact, your cultural perspective, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. So, based on your background, I mean, I listened to the little I scanned the QR code and listened to your story, and you speak a little bit more about that in terms of like respecting the land. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about that and maybe elaborate on how the mental and physical health effects from that respect or lack thereof?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is that when we think about the earth as a living spiritual organism, um, and when we think about, I always try to bring up the analogy of like when you buy a home, right? You take pride in your home, you take care of it, you tend to it. And I think I use that ideology and way of thinking when I think about the land, when I think about the earth, that this is my home and I need to take care of it. And again, I've said this before, there is such a disconnect with that piece, right? We kind of just we exist here and there's just like no legitimate care or understanding to what is actually happening with like our mountains and like the just the climate crisis that is like really reaching us here. And so I guess talking about the culture aspect, especially for those people who haven't grown up with that, what I try to do is to help people at least look at the land in a way that, indigenous people have always looked at the land. I think of people who, especially I have a line of farmers in my family history, people who have worked in agriculture my whole life. And I'll give you an example with my dad, growing up seeing my dad garden and my mom garden, they quite literally talk with the soil. They talk with the plants as if the plants were their children. Like they literally have a relationship with the agriculture that they produce. My mom's land in Tonga, she has a number of crops, and I could witness just the sacred relationship that the farmer had with the land that they were tending to. And it might seem funny, right, to like Western modern culture, seeing someone talk to a tree as if they were like an actual friend. It sounds silly, but like when you really think about um, what that means in a cultural lens, from a cultural aspect, that's what it looks like to respect the land. That's what it looks like to cultivate a relationship with the land where you would take care of it, where you would consider what toxins exist in the soil. You would consider, what would happen if the Great Salt Lake dries up and those toxins get into the air and how that's going to impact breathing and asthma, right? Like it's all connected, and seeing it as a life cycle that actually impacts those of us as humans who exist on this land. I think it would absolutely change the way that we see how we fit into the conversation of climate change and even just the conversation of like living on this planet. I mean, I always, bring this up to people that we quite literally in the solar system are the perfect position where human life form can exist. And it's not by coincidence. And this isn't even related to religions. It's just like the idea of like really respecting the fact that the earth is a living organism, and the idea that we can get away with fossil fuels and disrespecting the land in all types of ways, and that nothing and that no repercussions are going to happen. It's just selfish. And so anyways, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of where my head was going.
Yeah, it did. Thank you so much, Sunny. And I think it looks like we have a question for you in the chat too. Um, let's see. Looks like we have a question from Steven. Are any of the people today, so opening it up to all of the guest speakers, working to illuminate changing the Great Salt Lake's impact on our sister species, particularly birds?
Photographers and 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 photographers and
Brad, your feedback is still coming in. Did I'm not sure how we should go about this.
It might be helpful for Brad to dial in on the phone. potentially. Would anyone be willing to send, maybe Kaylee, could you send like the, let's see. True. Thank you for the suggestion, Addie. Totally.
I just let in his phone, so let's see if that works better.
Thank you. That's such a good question, Stephen. So thank you for posing that in thinking about what kind of species are being advocated for as well beyond, this beautiful, the beautiful lake. I know there's hundreds to thousands of species attached to that, including humans and birds for sure. So let's see. Oh, it looks like Brad is back.
Yeah.
Yay!
There you go.
You're sounding great.
Good.
Yeah, so the question for you, Brad, was are there any people on today's chat working to illuminate the changing Great Salt Lake's impacts on our sister species, specifically birds?
Yeah, we're doing one of the most detailed bird studies in the region, up at the Woodaoga, or the Bear River Massacre site. We definitely share and talk with the Bear River Bird Refuge and the Great Salt Lake. We've identified over 60 species of birds coming to our wetlands and trying to reestablish. And so, it all comes down to clean water and wetlands. If you don't have that, you don't have birds. So, that's really what it's looking for. And I know that, through the state, the wetlands grant specific for wetlands, that's exactly what it's going to do. And so that's why we kind of look at that. But, if you want to have a healthy ecosystem, you'll have animals, and that's just, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, totally. And this is kind of a natural transition into Brad's slide too. So, Kaylee, if you can just click to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. Brad, so from what I understand, you're doing quite a lot of work surrounding the Great Salt Lake, which and I would love to share that with the audience. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, and maybe a little bit about your story too.
Yeah, so I grew up on the banks of the Great Salt Lake. I grew up in Syracuse, Utah. I hunted those wetlands. I walked all through there. I could smell the lake every morning. And when I was a kid, if you wanted to get out to Antelope Island, you had to walk across the broken causeway and kind of swim a little bit of the way. So it was a hike if you wanted to get there. It's a lot easier now, but we never at the time thought, oh, the lake will recede this far. Where people are building homes and highways and stuff, that's where I used to hunt ducks, like my ancestors did. And so it's disheartening to see that the lake regress. And so quite literally looked at it culturally. This is our home. The Great Salt Lake was part of our territory, and we used it for salt, and the wetlands that went there, we were able to find food and different things. And so the area as a whole just kind of is important to us. My background, I worked for almost 20 years with the Bureau of Reclamation in the Colorado River Salinity Control Program. So I ran grants and programs in the Colorado River Basin where salt, that's in the system would cause about $360 million worth of farm damage a year and affects 30 million people. And so that's the same sort of thing we'll be looking at here that people don't understand. If those salts get, into the air, into the ground and everything like that, it's really, bad. So I just kind of culturally and from a professional's perspective, just kind of had that. So just kind of going on with what the Northwestern Band is doing. In 2018, we purchased what's called the Bear River Massacre site. Largest massacre in U.S. history, happened on January 29th, 1863. For 160 years, we'd go visit it, but we could never really walk on it or own it. It turned into grazing land. They channelized the water system, which really took down the water quality and the water quantity, flood irrigation and those different things. And so when we purchased it, we just kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, what do we do? And so we just said, well, culturally, what would we do? And it would native plants, remove the invasive, try to get the water, not force the water where to go, but like build an infrastructure where we allow the water to meander its way back to the Bear River, which will all create better water, more water quality, um, water flow enhancements. Just with the enhancements we've done this year, we've gone from having to, irrigate our field in 8 days. It takes one now. And so all that water is being deposited back into the Bear River, which will head down to the Great Salt Lake. We're monitoring all of our water, so we know exactly how much we're sending. And we haven't even really started with the big stuff of our project yet. When we realized that, the Great Salt Lake was having these sorts of issues and meeting with the state of Utah, we just really, our cultural beliefs really stack up with what has to happen environmentally. So we're happy to be in that sort of section of, okay, hey, yeah, our beliefs coincide. We didn't do this to start out for the Great Salt Lake, but that has become probably our second main focus after our culture, which is really tied together. So it's like 1 and 1A. And so that's just really kind of what we're doing. We just received another grant for $4.2 million. And so we'll probably have done about $10 million worth of work to enhance this section of what we call Battle Creek, which is the highest sediment loader in the entire Bear River watershed. So we have the dirtiest water in the entire watershed, and we're trying to fight that. And we'll do that with, beaver dam analogs and removing the invasive, where we're going to remove 40 acres of Russian olive trees. We're going to plant back 200 acres of plants and trees. We've put in, I don't know, 40,000 by now, and we'll do another 130,000 of native plants and trees that were there that will help the water system and not divert water like a Russian olive would do. So there's just a lot of things going on. We're trying to be involved in education and letting people know, hey, this is, before irrigation started, there was no issues with the lake. We don't have any oral history that talks about the lake going away or the lake receding or anything like that. And so, we have oral histories about big snow and, irrigation and some of those things, which are necessary for farmers, but we just have to find a better way to do certain things. So we're just here to try and help remind people, this is an Aboriginal territory, and, we do have volunteer opportunities for people that want to come and help plant or remove weeds or do whatever. And so we can put an email in the chat if you want to sign up for one of those lists. But I usually get that question, so I popped that out there. But yeah, that's really kind of how we are.
That was one of my questions: is how can people get involved and support these efforts? I mean, y'all are doing such amazing work. For the land, for your people, but really just like for kind of everyone overall that's kind of, gets to receive some of the benefits just in such responsible stewardship and revitalization of the land. So for those people who feel really passionately and want to get involved, where can they find you?
So Maria Monker, who's on my staff and our PR person, is going to post either my email or her email. And she has a list of things that she can put you on, and we'll respond and get those sorts of things out. And they'll start being posted on our website when we're finished upgrading it and those sorts of things.
Awesome. And what's that website name? We have about 1 minute left, but I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I'll have Maria put it in the chat, but it's nwbshoshone.com. So
awesome. Well, are there any other questions in the chat for Brad? Such a wealth of knowledge. It's so inspiring to hear about all the work that you all are doing. That's so needed. And it was fascinating to hear even both the perspectives that are so different, but yet so intertwined, even between just Sunny and Brad too. So thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your insight. I do highly encourage everyone to go and listen to the Stay Salty podcast. It is incredible. Brad's episode is fascinating. Sunny's story is incredible. So definitely, of course, and all of the other ones for sure. So thanks again. And is there anything else that you all would like to leave with the audience? Any pieces of hope, anything we didn't get to cover that you just feel the burning desire that you need to share?
Tiana, there's actually a question in the chat that I feel like is a good question because it is an action item that people can take with them. Addie asked, is there anything else actionable that you can think of that people like me can do to help with all of this? So what is something that we could do starting today to start making sure that we can take care of this land?
Brad, take it away.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just be responsible with what you have and what you own and what you can control. You know, we try to have volunteer. We can't do our project without volunteers, and hope because of where our project sits, just a few miles above the Great Salt Lake. That's why we have volunteers. If you can't come out, we have opportunities to for people to pay for a tree donation, and we geotag it, and we let you know where it is and how it's going. In your own communities, it's honestly people like, oh, water, like, no, seriously, that helps if you practice good watering habits. If you find out what plants are around, if you're near a water source or a creek or any sort of thing like that, find out what's around there, see if it's invasive, see if you can get it removed, see if you can plant a tree. Because there's not a lot people can do if you just don't have these large pieces of land. But what we can do is just be more responsible with water, be more, just kind of like, hey, what can I plant that will really help oxygen, really help the earth and those sorts of things. And that's what these things are, you go to things and you talk to experts and like, oh yeah, you should plant this and plant that for that area. And I think there are plenty of folks that would volunteer to help. Like, hey, here's what you should do. But I mean, honestly, that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Yeah, and it looks like Sunny even has a different perspective, which is awesome. Sunny, if you wanna shout that out, please feel free.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just didn't want to cut into
Good.
Brad's time because I know there was a lot of technical difficulties. But yeah, honestly, just educating people. I always bring it up in conversation about, the amount of tax dollars that went into building the prison. The original project was supposed to be 550 million. It actually took 1.2 billion to
Wow.
build the prison. Why? Because of the environmental concerns. The majority of that money went into getting tons of dirt to actually lay down on the foundation because it wasn't a viable foundation to even build something there. And so every time I bring it up in conversation, almost always every Utah that I talk to did not know about this. And it matters because our tax dollars do go into these projects. And so just spreading education, being more aware, the more you know, always matters.
Thank you. Mhm. Yeah, anything else from the Stay Salty team? Any piece of hope, information, inspiration? Where can we find you?
Yeah, definitely. We're just going to highlight that we'll be hosting an in-person tour of the installation on February 22nd. So make sure to follow Of Salt and Sand on Instagram to get the latest updates and listen to the podcast wherever you hear them. And we're excited to have you guys tune in.
And I just want to close with a go out to the lake, take your friends to the lake, tell them how amazing and beautiful and important it is.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you again so much to our incredible guest speakers, the Stay Salty team, the Wake the Great Salt Lake team, and all of our wonderful audience members. Kaylee, where can we find this exhibition?
Sorry, my mouse has been giving me issues with this slideshow, but I will be going back. I found it. You can find this exhibition on the public street for free along Broadway, 300 South and between 200 East and 200 West. Good way to find it is to plug in one of these locations like Rose Wagner Performing Arts or Squatters Pub, and it will bring you right to it. There's also parking right there on the street, so it's easy to get to. We would also like to thank our partners because this installation wouldn't have happened without them. Andrew from Wake the Great Salt Lake of Salt and Sand, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Salt Lake City's Mayor Council, and Salt Lake City Arts Council. And then our supporters for Craft Lake City, the Salt Lake City Arts Council again, Sorensen Legacy Foundation, George and Dolores, Dory Eccles Foundation, Center for the Living City, Slug Mag, which is our sister company, Utah Division of Arts and Museums, ZAP is u.org, and the Temporary Museum of Permanent Change. If you are interested on collaborating with us for the next Local Voices installation, please reach out to Tiana at artisancoordinator@craftlakecity.com with any inquiries about bringing your mission-driven organization's message to the local voices. We love to showcase you, and this work fills our cups, so please bring it on. Thank you. For more information about our programming, please visit craftlakecity.com. And if you would like to find out more about the podcast, you can visit lakefacing.org. We will be sending out a survey, so please look out for that. Thank you, Tiana.
Thanks, everyone.